It's
Rory
not about being
McIlroy said
perfect.
7
It's
words
about
in a press
adapting, staying
conference that
confident.
completely
That's the
destroyed
key.
Bryson DeChambeau's entire career narrative. And Bryson still hasn't said a single word back. But here's what nobody is telling you. This story is not about a rivalry. It's not about a feud. It's not even really about golf. What this story is actually about is a man who was handed $850 million, walked away from it, stayed loyal, grinded, and is now watching the guy who took the money slowly run out of places to go. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand something about professional golf that the mainstream media is completely refusing to say out loud. Stay with me, because the second half of this video contains information that most golf channels don't even know yet, and it changes everything about what comes next for LIV, the PGA Tour, and the players caught in the middle. Before we go any further, if you are new here, welcome to Analysis PGA. This channel exists for one reason only, to give you the real story behind professional golf. No fluff, no PR spin, no recycle headlines. Just deep analysis, verified sourcing, and the kind of breakdown that makes you actually understand what is happening at the highest level of this sport. We are a growing channel, and every single subscriber genuinely matters. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications, because what I'm about to walk you through is the kind of content that changes how you watch golf forever. All right, let's get into it. The world Bryson DeChambeau built for himself. To understand what Rory McIlroy said and why it landed the way it did, you have to go back further than most coverage bothers to go. You have to understand the specific bet that Bryson DeChambeau made, not just financially, but philosophically, when he decided to leave the PGA Tour and join LIV Golf. Because Bryson did not leave quietly. He did not leave reluctantly. He left loudly, confidently, and with what looked at the time like a level of self-assurance that was almost impossible to argue with. Think about who Bryson DeChambeau was in 2022 when LIV launched. He was 28 years old. He was a U.S. Open champion. He had completely reinvented his body, added 40 pounds of muscle, and turned himself into one of the most powerful ball strikers the sport had ever seen. He had millions of social media followers. He had a YouTube channel that was genuinely growing. He had a brand. He had momentum. And LIV Golf came to him with an offer that, according to multiple reports, was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Guaranteed money. No cuts to worry about. A schedule that gave him time to build his media presence. A league that marketed him as one of its crown jewels. From the outside, the decision made complete sense. Take the money. Keep winning majors on the side. Build your brand. Live your best life. And for a while, that is exactly what happened. Bryson won the U.S. Open in 2024. His second major. An absolutely dominant performance that reminded the entire golf world that whatever you thought about his decision to join LIV, the man could still play. He could still compete at the highest level when the biggest stages came around. His YouTube channel grew. His personality, polarizing as it was, connected with a younger audience in a way that very few professional golfers ever manage. He became a genuine content creator, not just a golfer who happened to post videos. On paper, the Bryson DeChambeau bet looked like it was paying off. But paper has a way of hiding things. And in the spring of 2025, the things that paper was hiding started coming to the surface. The moment everything changed. Let me give you the exact timeline here, because the timeline matters enormously. Approximately 2 months before the official announcement, Bryson DeChambeau was told directly, explicitly, that LIV Golf's funding was secured through 2032. Through 2032. That is not a vague reassurance. That is not a we think things will work out. That is a specific year, a specific commitment. 7 more years of guaranteed financial backing from the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia. DeChambeau heard that. He planned around that. He built his calendar, his career expectations, his financial assumptions around that promise. Then the announcement came. Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, the sovereign wealth fund with over $900 billion in assets, confirmed it was pulling its financial backing from LIV Golf after the 2026 season. $5.3 billion invested since 2022. Gone. Not reduced. Not restructured. Gone after December. Think about what that number means for a second. $5.3 billion. That is not a startup burning through seed money. That is one of the wealthiest institutions on the planet pouring extraordinary resources into a golf league for 4 years, and then deciding it was not worth continuing. LIV Golf hired an investment bank to find new investors. As of the time we are recording this video, no new investor has been publicly announced. The league is trying to survive in real time, and the players, the men who were promised guaranteed money, promised ability, promised a legitimate alternative to the PGA Tour, are watching it happen. And then reporters went to find Bryson DeChambeau. He is LIV's biggest active name. His contract expires after this season. He is 32 years old. He is a 2-time major champion. He is one of the most recognizable golfers on the planet. They asked him a straightforward question. What do you do if LIV Golf collapses? Now, I want you to think about that question for a moment before I tell you the answer. Because this is a man who has won 2 U.S. Opens. A man who was offered and accepted a contract worth hundreds of millions of dollars. A man whose entire professional identity is built around being a relentless competitor who outworks everyone and outthinks everyone and finds advantages where other people see none. What does that man say when asked about the future of his professional career? He said he would love to grow his YouTube channel 3 times, maybe even more. He said he would love to do dubbing in different languages, to give the world more reason to watch his content. And then he added, almost as an afterthought, that he would love to play in tournaments that want him. Play in tournaments that want him. A 2-time major champion, talking about YouTube subscriber growth, language dubbing, and finding somewhere to play. I want you to hold that image very carefully in your mind. Because 3 days later, Rory McIlroy is going to deliver 7 words that hit that image like a wrecking ball. We are about halfway through the story, and I promise you, what comes next is a part that every other golf channel glossed over. There's a detail buried in DeChambeau's press conference that almost no one covered. And when you hear it, you will understand why McIlroy's words hit as hard as they did. Do not go anywhere. What Bryson actually said that nobody reported. Here's the thing about the YouTube headline. It was real. It was significant. But it was not even the most important thing Bryson DeChambeau said at that press conference. While everyone was busy writing the DeChambeau wants to grow his YouTube channel story, another answer quietly slipped through without generating anywhere near the coverage it deserved. A reporter asked DeChambeau a simple, direct question. Are you concerned that the PIF will not pay out the remainder of your contract? His answer was 4 words. Your guess is as good as mine. Read that again. Your guess is as good as mine. This is a man with a contract reportedly worth hundreds of millions of dollars. A contract that was supposed to be one of the most lucrative deals in the history of professional sports. And he does not know if he is going to be paid. He was told 2 months before the PIF announcement that funding was secured. Then the announcement came. And then silence. No communication from PIF since. No reassurance. No timeline. No explanation. He is showing up to practice. He is preparing for tournament appearances. He is representing LIV Golf at events. And he is genuinely uncertain whether the money he was promised, the money that was the entire foundation of his decision to leave the PGA Tour, actually exists. Meanwhile, and this is a contrast that I need you to feel, not just understand, Rory McIlroy was at Quail Hollow that same week, playing a PGA Tour signature event with confirmed $20 million purse, shooting 67, 5 birdies and 7 holes on the back 9, moving into contention, doing what he has done his entire career. DeChambeau, standing at a practice range, uncertain if his contract will be honored. McIlroy, standing on a leaderboard, playing the best golf of his life. That is the actual gap between where these 2 men are standing right now. Not the gap in talent, not the gap in popularity, the gap in reality. Now we get to the press conference. McIlroy had just come off the back 9 at Quail Hollow. He shot 67, 5 birdies. He was sharp, he was focused, and he was in the kind of form that reminds you that even approaching 37 years old, he is one of the most gifted golfers who has ever lived. A reporter mentioned LIV players like Anirban Lahiri were saying they had zero interest in returning to the PGA Tour. Lahiri had told journalists he knew at least a dozen players who would rather quit professional golf entirely than come back. He called the entire conversation about potential returns, his exact words, the biggest joke ever. McIlroy started carefully. Deliberately, he said he had probably been too judgmental at the start of all this, that he was seeing things from his own perspective, and that perspective had limitations. He said anyone who wanted to come back to the PGA Tour should be welcomed with open arms, because anything that makes the tour stronger is good for the game. That is a measured, diplomatic, generous answer. And then he paused. And then he said this. But if you want to be the most competitive golfer you can be, this is the place to be. And if you don't want to play here, I think that says something about you. 7 words at the end of that sentence. That says something about you, not something about your contract, not something about your finances, not something about the decision you made 4 years ago when the money was enormous, and LIV looked like it might genuinely challenge the established order of professional golf. About you, about who you are as a competitor. Right now, in this moment, everyone in that press conference room knew exactly who those words were for. There was no ambiguity. There was no need for names. 3 days earlier, when asked about the future of his professional career, the man those words were aimed at had talked about YouTube subscriber growth and language dubbing. McIlroy did not need to say the name. He did not need to be angry. He did not need to be aggressive. He just needed 7 words in a calm voice. And the entire golf world understood. Here is what I find most fascinating about this entire exchange. DeChambeau has not publicly responded. Not a tweet. Not an Instagram story. Not a comment at a press conference. The silence is enormous. And I think that silence tells us something very important about where Bryson DeChambeau actually is right now. Not professionally, but psychologically. We are going to get to that. But first I need to walk you through the financial argument. Because DeChambeau did push back, just not directly at McIlroy. Stay with me. DeChambeau's rebuttal, and why it reveals more than it defends. Later in the week, DeChambeau addressed the broader criticism. He acknowledged that the PGA Tour is not exactly thriving either. He pointed out correctly that the tour has been reducing field sizes, cutting employees, restructuring its business model, negotiating a media rights deal that has taken longer to finalize than anyone expected. He said the egos need to be dropped on both sides. And honestly, he is not entirely wrong on the facts. The PGA Tour is going through a significant transition period. The alliance discussions with the PIF, the ongoing negotiations, the internal debates about scheduling and eligibility, none of it has been smooth. But here's a critical difference between acknowledging challenges and being in the position Bryson DeChambeau is in right now. The PGA Tour is restructuring from a position of institutional strength. It has a confirmed television deal. It has sponsors who have not left. It has a commissioner who is actively managing a complex transition. It has players who are still competing, still cashing checks, still building legacies on the most documented and scrutinized tour in the sport's history. LIV Golf is trying to find an investor to replace the sovereign wealth fund that decided it was too expensive to continue. Those are not equivalent situations. Acknowledging that the PGA Tour has challenges does not change the fact that Bryson DeChambeau does not know if his contract is going to be honored. And then there was that phrase again. He would love to play in tournaments that want him. I keep coming back to this phrase because I think it is the most revealing thing DeChambeau has said throughout this entire situation. Not because it is embarrassing, though many people in the golf world treated it that way, but because of what it reveals about how DeChambeau is now framing his own value. He is a 2-time U.S. Open champion. He has 2.69 million YouTube subscribers. He generates more digital engagement than almost any other professional golfer alive. The commercial case for having Bryson DeChambeau at your tournament is genuinely strong, and yet he is framing his future in terms of finding tournaments that want him, not tournaments that need him, not tournaments that would benefit from him, tournaments that want him. That is the language of someone who is not entirely certain of his standing. That is not the language of a man who is confidently in control of his career. The path back and why it is not simple. Here is the part of this story that requires the most careful explanation, because there's a lot of misunderstanding about exactly how complicated Bryson DeChambeau's potential return to the PGA Tour actually is. In 2022, DeChambeau filed an antitrust lawsuit against the PGA Tour. He argued that the tour's restrictions on players joining LIV amounted to anti-competitive behavior. It was a significant legal action that put him in direct opposition to the institution he had spent his career competing on. In May of 2023, he withdrew from that lawsuit. Now, some coverage treated that withdrawal as essentially closing the chapter. He dropped the suit. He moved on. The legal hostility ended. But that framing misses something important. The PGA Tour's returning member program, the structured pathway that allowed players like Brooks Koepka to come back, is closed. Commissioner Brian Rolapp has confirmed it will not be reopened, and players who took legal action against the tour are going to face additional scrutiny in any return conversation. That is not speculation. That is the current institutional reality. DeChambeau knows this. When he was asked about potential penalties he might face if he tried to return, he called them, and this word choice is important, quite unfortunate in his opinion, considering what he could do for the tour. Unfortunate, not unfair, not unjust, not wrong. Unfortunate. That is the word a man uses when he knows the penalties are probably coming, and he is already trying to build public sympathy before any formal negotiation begins. It is a soft word chosen deliberately. It is the beginning of a PR positioning strategy, not a principled objection. McIlroy was asked directly whether he thought the tour should make it easier for players like DeChambeau to return. His answer was precise and worth examining carefully. He said there are going to be a lot of bridges to cross to get there. He said it all depends on what actually happens to LIV Golf. He said if LIV continues in some form, most of those players will still be playing the majority of their golf on that circuit regardless. He was not closing the door. He was not saying DeChambeau can never come back. He was being precise about geography, specifically how far away that door currently is. The real story beneath the story. I said at the beginning of this video that this story is not really about a rivalry or a feud, and I meant that. What this story is actually about is consequences. The consequences of choices made under pressure, with incomplete information, in pursuit of certainty in a sport where certainty does not exist. I want to make sure you understand exactly why McIlroy's position is as strong as it is right now. Because it is not just about staying. It is about what staying cost him. And that is the part most coverage has completely missed. What staying actually cost Rory McIlroy. Here's a number that everyone knows but nobody really sits with. According to multiple credible reports, Rory McIlroy was offered $850 million to join LIV Golf. $850 million. He dismissed the report publicly and never left the PGA Tour. Now, I want to be fair here. McIlroy has never confirmed that exact number. He has been careful not to get drawn into detailed discussions about what he was or was not offered. But the reports came from multiple sources and were never meaningfully denied in a way that suggested they were significantly wrong. $850 million. And he stayed. He stayed while his friends left. He stayed while players he had competed against for years cashed enormous checks and disappeared onto private jets to tournaments in Saudi Arabia and Singapore. He stayed while people questioned whether his loyalty was naive, whether he was leaving money on the table that he would never see again, whether his commitment to the PGA Tour was a romantic attachment to an institution that did not deserve that kind of loyalty. He stayed, and he kept competing. He kept grinding. He kept putting the work on weeks when nobody was watching, when there were no cameras, when it was just him and his preparation. He is now 36 years old, ranked second in the world, with 6 major championships, currently playing what many observers are describing as the best and most consistent golf of his career. He is playing with freedom and confidence that suggests a man who has made peace with his choices and is now simply doing what he was born to do. Compare that to Bryson DeChambeau, 32 years old, uncertain about his contract, talking about YouTube dubbing, hoping for tournaments that won him. McIlroy did not need to say any of this. He did not need to make comparisons. He did not need to list accomplishments or point at financial decisions. He just needed 7 words, delivered calmly at a press conference after shooting 67. That says something about you. The laugh that said everything. There is one more moment from that McIlroy press conference that I have not talked about yet, and I think it might actually be more revealing than the 7 words. When discussing LIV Golf's financial situation, the PIF pulling out, the search for new investors, the uncertainty hanging over the circuit, McIlroy laughed. Not a dismissive laugh, not a cruel laugh, a genuine laugh. The kind of laugh that comes from looking at a situation and finding the absurdity of it almost impossible to contain. He said, when one of the wealthiest sovereign wealth funds in the world decides you're too expensive for them, that sort of says something. Think about what he is pointing at. The PIF manages over $900 billion in assets. $900 billion. This is not a fund that runs out of money. This is not a fund that has to make difficult financial trade-offs. This is one of the most liquid and powerful investment vehicles on the planet. And they looked at LIV Golf and decided it was not worth continuing to fund. That is the most informed financial assessment of LIV Golf's value that exists anywhere in the world. More informed than any analyst report. More informed than any sports business journalist. The people who have unlimited money and full access to all the financial information looked at the numbers and made a decision. McIlroy did not need to call LIV a failure. He did not need to produce a financial analysis. He just pointed at the people who had been paying for it and let their decision do the talking. That is a level of rhetorical efficiency that is genuinely remarkable, and it is worth appreciating even if you disagree with his position on the whole LIV versus PGA Tour debate. Here is the question I know you are asking right now. What actually happens next? Does LIV Golf find new investors and survive? Does DeChambeau end up back on the PGA Tour? Does McIlroy win another major? Does any of this get resolved cleanly, or does it just sort of drift into ambiguity? I have genuine thoughts on all of this, and we're going to work through it right now, because the end game here is more complicated than either side wants to admit. Let me walk you through 3 realistic scenarios for how this all ends. Not the optimistic version, not the pessimistic version, the realistic version, based on what we actually know right now. Scenario 1. LIV finds new investors and survives in some form. This is a scenario LIV is actively working toward. The league has hired an investment bank. There are reports of conversations with various private equity groups and sovereign wealth funds from other regions. It is not impossible that a deal gets done. But here is the important question that scenario raises. Even if LIV survives financially, what happens to its best players? If PIF backing is gone, the guaranteed superstar contracts that attracted names like DeChambeau and Phil Mickelson and Jon Rahm are almost certainly gone too. A LIV Golf that survives on private equity money is a structurally different product than the one that launched in 2022. The contracts change. The guarantees change. The players who stayed because of the financial security have a fundamentally different calculation to make. Scenario 2. LIV collapses and the players try to return. If LIV folds, the pathway back to the PGA Tour for players like DeChambeau becomes a central story in professional golf. And it is not simple. The returning member program is closed. The tour has been deliberately vague about what a post-LIV return process would look like. There would be suspensions. There would be financial penalties. There would be ranking resets that force some of these players to qualify through satellite tours. Some players would accept those terms and fight their way back. Some, and Lahiri's comment suggests this group is larger than people realize, would rather walk away from competitive professional golf entirely than submit to what they would see as a humiliation. And then there's a DeChambeau-specific problem, the antitrust lawsuit history. The tour is not going to simply wave him back in without conditions. And what those conditions look like is genuinely unknown right now. Scenario 3. A negotiated settlement that nobody loves. The most likely outcome, and I say this based on how professional sports governance tends to actually work, is some kind of messy, incomplete, politically awkward settlement that gives each side partial wins and leaves everyone slightly unhappy. LIV gets absorbed or merged into some kind of international tour structure. The PGA Tour gets to claim it preserved its integrity. Some LIV players get pathways back that involve reduced penalties. Some players simply age out of the conversation, and the golf world moves forward with a complicated history that takes years to fully process. It is not the clean ending that either narrative, the triumphant return or the definitive collapse, promises. but it is probably the most honest prediction. I want to pull back from the tactical details for a moment and say something that I think is the most important thing in this entire video. This story, the McIlroy's 7 words, the DeChambeau YouTube answer, the PIF announcement, the contract uncertainty. This story is not really about LIV versus the PGA Tour. It is about what professional golfers, and by extension all professional athletes, are actually competing for. There are 2 things you can optimize your career for. You can optimize for money, or you can optimize for legacy. These are not always in conflict. Sometimes the biggest contracts go to the players building the biggest legacies. But sometimes, and this is one of those times, they diverge in ways that become impossible to ignore. Bryson DeChambeau optimized for money. He took the biggest offer available. He made a rational financial calculation, and he acted on it. There is nothing shameful about that. There is nothing stupid about it. Most people, offered what he was offered, would have made the same choice. But here's what he may not have fully understood when he made that choice. Money buys security, but it does not buy significance. It does not buy the feeling of being in the middle of the most competitive field in the world every week. It does not buy the pressure of a Sunday at Augusta or a final round at the U.S. Open. It does not buy the knowledge that when you win, you have beaten the best players alive. McIlroy understood something, or perhaps just felt something, that kept him on the PGA Tour even when the financial argument for leaving was enormous. He understood that the thing he loves about golf is not the paycheck. It is the competition. It is the pressure. It is the knowledge that this is a place where the real game is being played. And that is what his 7 words were really saying. Not, you made the wrong financial decision. Not, you are a lesser golfer than me. Just, if this is what you love, if competition is what drives you, then why would you be anywhere else? And DeChambeau's silence in response to that question is the loudest answer he has ever given. Before I wrap up, I need to tell you one thing that I have not mentioned yet in this video, and it is the detail that, in my opinion, actually defines how this entire situation resolves. It involves a conversation that happened behind closed doors between DeChambeau and PGA Tour officials that has barely been reported anywhere. I will tell you exactly what we know about it right now. According to sourcing that has not been widely circulated in mainstream golf coverage, there have been informal conversations. Not official negotiations, not structured talks, but genuine human conversations between DeChambeau's representatives and people inside the PGA Tour's administration. The nature of those conversations, from what has been reported in independent golf media, is exactly what you would expect. Probing, cautious, both sides try to understand what the other side actually wants without committing to anything formal. What is significant about those conversations is not the content, because very little of the content has been confirmed. What is significant is that they are happening at all, because if DeChambeau was genuinely confident that LIV Golf was going to survive in a form that honored his contract and maintained his competitive life, those conversations would not be necessary. The fact that they are happening tells you something about how DeChambeau and his team are privately assessing the situation, regardless of what he says publicly about YouTube channels and language dubbing. And that is the gap that McIlroy, knowingly or not, put his finger on with those 7 words. The public face is confidence. YouTube growth, playing in tournaments that want him. The private reality is conversations with the institution he sued. Trying to understand if there's a way back, knowing that the way back is going to require him to accept terms that he is already publicly calling unfortunate. That is not the position of a man who made the right call. That is a position of a man who made an understandable call and is now living with its consequences. So let me bring it all together. Rory McIlroy said 7 words. That says something about you. He said it calmly. He said it after shooting 67, and he said it knowing exactly who it was for. Bryson DeChambeau was asked about the future of his career and talked about YouTube subscriber growth and language dubbing. He was asked about his contract and said, "Your guess is as good as mine." He has not publicly responded to McIlroy's words. The PIF, with $900 billion in assets, decided LIV Golf was too expensive to continue funding. LIV is looking for new investors. No deal has been announced. McIlroy was offered $850 million to leave. He stayed. He is 36, ranked 2nd in the world, playing the best golf of his life. DeChambeau left. He has 2 majors, 2.69 million YouTube subscribers, a contract he is not sure will be honored, and no answer. This is not a feud. This is not a rivalry. This is a story of two men who looked at the same moment in professional golf and made different choices about what mattered most to them. And those choices are now playing out in real time, in press conferences and practice ranges and quiet conversations that the cameras never see. The most competitive place in professional golf is the PGA Tour. That is not an opinion. That is a conclusion that the wealthiest people in the world have effectively confirmed with their wallets. And if you do not want to be there, if that is not where you want to compete, then yes, that says something about you. Thank you for watching Rick Analysis PGA. If you got value from this breakdown, please subscribe right now. Every subscriber on this channel is someone who makes this work possible, and I read every comment. Drop your thoughts below on where you think Bryson DeChambeau ends up by the end of 2026. I will be reading every single one. There's a video on this channel covering exactly what Jon Rahm said about feeling trapped inside LIV Golf with no visible way out. That story connects directly to everything we covered today, and I strongly recommend watching it next. I will see you in the next one.